Hey guys, thanks so much for coming out here to watch this. Happy Halloween, and how appropriate to be talking about something that is Halloween creepy, the coronavirus. Well, I know there's a ton of info packed into the last episode, episode 8, which was part 1 of the coronavirus update for October 2020. This is going to be part 2 of that update, and I'm going to try and narrow down the focus to just 2 items. First, I'm going to wrap up that conversation on Candida auris and why Candida auris is presenting a problem for COVID-19. And then I'm going to go into the flu season for this year. So only these 2 items in this episode. And what I'm going to do is do a 3rd episode, which is going to go over the treatments that are going on right now for COVID-19. Okay, so in the last episode, you were introduced to Candida auris. It's a new fungus. It was first discovered in 2009. So, why is this important to COVID-19? This fungus likes hospitals. It causes severe infections and, of course, it spreads easily between patients. The mortality rate is around 30%. It's going to be similar to MERS if we're just talking about Candida auris. And again, Candida auris infections tend to occur in hospital care settings. And what else about Candida auris? Hey, did you hear about Candida auris?
That stuff's resistant to antifungal drugs.
It's on everything.
With the pandemic, it's really hard to clean the hospitals.
I hear you. Not enough time, equipment, or people. We know it's in the hospitals. And in the last episode, I gave you a link to the CDC site for tracking Candida auris. You can find out if your state has Candida auris in the hospitals. And the real risk is the risk of co-infection, both Candida auris and COVID-19. As this fungus makes its way into our ICU wards, the risk becomes greater. Infection Control Today released the latest stats on co-infection in their article called COVID Unleashes the Lurking Scourge, Candida auris. And I quote them as stating, Candida auris can cause a dangerous co-infection. Why that is because this is a fungus and not a bacteria. Antibiotics don't work. In fact, few things do. And according to the article, current mortality rates with a co-infection of Candida auris appear to be around 60%. Okay, so what's the summary on this? This fungus lives in hospital settings. It's difficult to decontaminate. It's a really dangerous co-infection with COVID-19. And the mortality rates with COVID-19 and a co-infection of Candida auris are around 60%. Okay, enough of that. What about the flu season? Let's do a quick refresher on what happened last year. Before COVID-19, the flu season was getting longer and longer, and last year, it felt like the season lasted all year long. In my clinic, the end of the 2018-2019 flu season rolled right into some crazy summer stomach virus that moved right into the 2019-2020 flu season. There just wasn't a break from being sick. Not only was the season getting longer, it was getting more virulent. The 2018-2019 flu season saw hospitalizations at 8.6 people per 100,000 persons. The 2019-2020 flu season, which was last year, it was 9.2 per 100,000 people. You may already know that we use Australia as an early predictor to our flu season, and their season ends just as ours start. And the strains they see are usually what we see. By watching their season, we get an idea if what was selected for the flu vaccine is going to work. If it doesn't work in Australia, it's usually not going to work here either. So last year, they had an early flu start too. They had about 310,000 reported cases. The population of Australia is only about 25 million, so that's about 8% of the population of the United States. So, of course, they're going to have smaller numbers than us. The crappy thing about last year's flu season, the 2019 to 2020 flu season, was it started out with influenza B, which was pretty manageable, and then it ended with influenza A, and it ended with a specific influenza A identified as influenza A H1N1 PDM09. If I go back to my episode 7 in my Life Under the Coronavirus series, around 7.5 minutes, I'm back at the CDC weekly flu surveillance website. That was back in May of 2020. And you can see under the public health lab that H1N1 ended the season, and it was this influenza A H1N1 PDM09. What's unique about this PDM09 strain are a couple things. First, it was detected in the United States in 2009, and it spread across the world. Few young people had any existing immunity to this virus. But what's really weird is nearly 1/3 of people over 60 years old had antibodies against this virus, which they think may be from exposure to an older H1N1 virus earlier in their lives. In 2009, about 13,000 people died from this flu. And in that year, it was estimated that worldwide from this strain of the virus, there were about 150,000 to maybe about 600,000 deaths from this H1N1 PDM09 strain. Okay, let's get back to influenza A, because those of you who have gotten it know it felt more like being hit by the Star Wars Death Star instead of the flu. It lasted forever. People were deathly ill. Every one of my clients had to go through a hall of Chinese medicine to overcome the fatigue and just the general unwellness they felt after that flu. Otherwise, they didn't recover to their pre-flu health. Okay, so now that we know the landscape, this H1N1 PDM09, I really wanted you guys to be aware of that. That was that horrible, crappy flu that we had at the beginning of this year that just felt like a truck had hit you. It took forever to get over. And it's really important to acknowledge that, because that's going to be part of this next part. So now we know what the landscape is. And so Australia, tell me what's happening this year with the flu.
It's looking good. The season started out like a normal season way back in March of this year, and then things changed. Remember last year we reported over 310,000 confirmed cases? This year, 21,000 cases with only 36. You can count them, just 36 deaths. And we're pretty clear that these numbers are unique and due to social distancing, COVID-19 related public health measures, and the community's adherence to public health messages. We actually have quarantine laws in Australia in addition to guidelines, and this could be the reason for the low transmission this season. Kim, lastly, if you look at the numbers, 87% of the tests are coming back as H1N1, and of those that have been subtyped, the majority of them are this H1N1 PDM09.
Ralph, thanks so much for taking time out to talk to us today. And if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like the majority of the influenza viruses that you're experiencing in Australia this year were the H1N1 PDM09, that Death Star influenza virus.
Kim, exactly. And thanks so much for having me here.
Okay, guys, so there you have it. You've heard it. The flu virus that's going around this year is that horrid flu virus that went around at the beginning of this year, that H1N1 PDM09. And that coincides with what I've been hearing right now in the community, that people are getting really sick if they're getting this influenza. So you might want to wear masks to avoid that, especially if you've already experienced it. You know it's a nightmare. There was also some chatter that horrible flu at the beginning of the year was probably COVID-19, and it could have been, it may have been, but the influenza tests weren't saying that it was, and they were coming back more with this H1N1 PDM09, and we're never going to know, right? Because we didn't have testing then. We have very little testing now. And so, the best I can say is right now, the only data we have is that flu at the beginning of the year was truly a flu. And so hopefully you can take care of yourself this year, and with the mask and social distancing, avoid that nightmare again. Okay, guys, until next time, I will catch you on the other side. And what we'll do this next time is we're going to go over the treatments, because there's some really interesting things that is happening in the science when it comes to treating COVID-19.